Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for uh, inviting me to speak this morning, and of course for organizing another one of these very interesting and exciting series of Green uh, Institute workshops. I note that there's a very ambitious, as always, agenda. And I'd like to, on behalf of the university, welcome all those persons who are joining us from wherever they are in Guyana and around the world. In thanking you for joining us this morning and for your work in organizing and supporting the Institute. Special thanks, of course, have already been given by Professor Mandel to the founding director of the Institute, Dr. Thomas Singh, and his team for not only the work of thinking through the founding of the Institute itself, but also the work that they have been doing. His team, I note that Dr. Pereira is somewhere else in Verdant Green. I'm not sure exactly where, but thank you also for supporting the work of the Institute. When this institute was formed a number of years ago, they exposed a few goals, which I think bear repeating this morning, and not in detail, but just to summarize. And the goals of the UGGI were to mobilize and coordinate resources, including faculty and so on, in the diaspora to contribute to the development of the proposed institute, to provide a destination for researchers and postdocs and other persons to study abroad, and to bring a range of resources, including their intellectual ideas and funding, to facilitate pertinent volunteers and students, to develop novel and rigorous programs of executive training, research, policy analysis, and development around 3 pillars at the time of green economy, and to ensure that the output of the Institute is integrated into policy, business practices, and more generally, social awareness. So therefore, the program that we see this morning and over the next 3 days, I think best speaks to the penultimate goal of the Institute in looking at the ways in which Guyana might become a model for the rest of the world. One of the things that has struck me in reading through the program is the title, and I think Professor Mandel has already referred to this, and the title, Climate Change and Energy Transition, Challenges and Paradoxes of Resource Abundance. And in thinking this through, I was wondering whether it really is a paradox or if we have a dilemma, but that's a whole theoretical question, and I'm sure Jose would be happy to engage on at some point. But really and truly, when we think about resource abundance in Guyana, we don't only think about the newly, we've always known that oil was there, it's just how to get to it that was a problem. But not only for this new and exciting industry, but also for all the others that are in Guyana, such as mining. I noted some, Dr. Bulkan is going to work on gold, but also questions of sustainable logging and forestation, sustainable fishing, sustainable agriculture. I recently met just 2 or 3 days ago with a company who has taken over a huge gold mining concession here in Guyana. And they're telling us that they are going to be introducing underground mining, something that we have not seen in the country before. And one begins to wonder a little bit about how that's going to look, what it's going to present us with, and what kinds of problems we are likely to see in that regard. So I believe that in the future, we should be seeing some more incorporation of those other sectors into the conversation coming out of the Green Institute and other institutes in the university. UG in 2018 set itself upon a path and a course that was going to, I guess, change its own view of itself and also change its trajectory as an educational institution. When we embarked on our Blueprint 2018, our blueprint in 2018, the blueprint is to 2040 when UG will be 75 years old, we began to look at a number of problems that the country would likely face. And amongst those we identified 9 major ones, and we felt that the university would have to therefore retool itself, its curricula, its orientation, everything about itself, to be able to address those problems aggressively in the next 20 years. And one of those, a number of those problems were likely to be at the center of our curriculum and how we were actually going to train our graduates to address those problems. Biodiversity and environment, as well as agriculture, were on the top of the list. Aquaculture was on that list as well. Sustainable tourism was on that list. But a thing that we called climate change was on that list, and a thing that we called human resiliency systems. At the time, we weren't 100% sure what those systems were going to look like and what they were, but we knew that given the multiple threats we saw coming down and the changes in our cultural and political and economic structure in our own country and in the world, that the resilience of human beings would be very, very, very important to their survival as a species. And then COVID-19 hit, and we had no doubt that we were on the right track. So I'm also delighted to see that the word resilience, which is popping up in the literature and policy documents of major national and international bodies, has found its way into the conversation that is happening in the seminar in the next few days. The university has been quietly involved in a number of policy and research and conversations around the question of sustainable development. Myself, my own work as a change specialist, my PhD work and other work has been interested in this question that someone has raised and will be speaking to in the next day or so about what really it is that has caused Guyana to not realize what we believe is the best of its potential. And one of the most important things that I have found in my own research popping up over and over and over again, and interestingly enough, today's paper, I note that many of the public commentators on the subject are pointing to exactly the same thing, and this is on their own. I haven't had those conversations recently. And that is the question of governance. Is it that we do not want to realize the best benefits of our resources? Or is it something else that is involved in the best use of our resources? And is it the way we do things? Is it in our relationships? Is it in our governance structure? And I would like to posit that it is about the way we manage and govern and the policies and the people that are involved in the development or exploitation, depending on where they stand, of our natural resources. And that any natural resource and anything we can farm out arable land quite out of ignorance and, of course, carelessness and irresponsibility. So the question of governance, I think, is front and center in this big conversation about whether or not Guyana will become and can become a model. And I want to place that on the front burner, maybe not for this workshop, because I note it's not, it's not really on this question, but also, but for the future, because governance is very big. And I wouldn't detain the meeting any further by going into the specific thoughts on this, except to say that there are a number of things that the university has been involved in. The country, we believe, has internalized for a long time. But when we go all the way back to the founding of perhaps Iwak Rama, it was under President who is very little spoken about now, Hugh Desmond Hoyt, in the early 80s and 90s, who would have established Iraq-Rama. And I believe that successive governments have been working around the idea. I think that Guyanese have generally internalized that we are an environmentally responsible, or at least we tend to and wish to be an environmentally responsible state, but people. And so we have the local carbon development strategy, which I think in which Dr. Thomas's work finds itself well placed. The Green Strait strategy that kind of reworked that in the last 5 years, and now we have LCDS, what I call as LCDS 2, under this new administration. University of Guyana has its the Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences, the Center for Biodiversity, its Energy Institute for Energy Diplomacy. And here I'd like to speak a little bit about this, because one of the things when we discussed in 2018, 2019, and we started our blueprint process, we deliberately did not foreground oil and gas as the only option for Guyana, but we placed the very important sector of oil and gas in the an entire rubric of energy, because we we're trying to reconcile the tension, in a certain sense, that you are addressing here today, between aspiring to be a green state and environmentally hyper responsible, but also the question of what it was going to require to develop this very important resource in a responsible way. And so the way we resolve that tension, in a certain sense, or trying to resolve it, is to place it in the context of general energy. And the university, of course, is doing work on solar, on water, on biomass, and so on, in various ways. So this is something that is happening as well. We also have been doing work on with the Conservation International. And here I'd like to really single out the work of Dr. David Singh, who's no longer with CI, but we were working very closely with him when he was, and still working with him now at WWF. But some very important policy documents and policy processes came out of our engagement with him. And these are now becoming exceedingly important. And these were the work that we did in collaboration with the then Ministry of Finance and CI and sometimes in a private working group, to foreground and develop the Natural Resources Fund, and to let people across the country, communities across the country, know what that Natural Resources Fund was likely to do. I note that Dr. Singh, in his reproduction in introducing this seminar, has talked about that fund and how much money is in that fund, and the fact that it's not touched yet, but how much money we might have actually borrowed against it. And one of the things that we were really very concerned about and spent a tremendous amount of time doing is really working out the governance of the fund and how we might protect the fund. But it, of course, is not amounting to any much at this particular moment. It's early days yet, because of course we have great needs, and other ways are being found around it. And yesterday I spent most of my day looking at the first draft of the local content bill, in which the university was also very deeply involved in all the consultations, but also writing for it, reviewing, and so on. And of course, at the front and center of this is education, but also about the governance of the sector and how the sector is going to be addressed. So we have been involved in a number of these conversations as a university. And so the work of the Institute and this workshop is, of course, advancing a different aspect of that, but an important one. I want to say in closing that one of the really important, the most important player that we have had in the education space, certainly at the tertiary education level in the last 5 years or so has been the oil industry. And this is not to say that I don't have a brief for anyone, but I just wanted to say that I was really happy to see the cast of the conversation in this workshop change, and to a much more, I think, open, accommodating, conversational stance, which really speaks to, how is it that we can encourage persons and organizations and industries to work in an environmentally sustainable way and to work with us as national stakeholders and international stakeholders in getting the best out of these resources, and not only one resource, but all of the others. Because there's some worrisome things that may be happening in other areas that we need to address. And when I had spoken at the first energy conference in 2017, 2018, that was held in Guyana, GPEX 1, I had very presumptuously, I believe, outlined a number of expectations that Guyana would have for anyone coming into the country to do this kind of exploration and production. And I know that many people might have taken umbrage to that presentation, because when they saw the title of my presentation, which was Managing Expectations, they thought that I was going to give a presentation on how to manage Guyanese, how they could manage Guyanese expectations. But that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to start a conversation about what expectations Guyanese had, and how in a collaborative, consultative, and co-creational and co-production way, we could possibly forge this very problematic track that we could end up on. And in doing this, I think the university has been a very decent beneficiary of support for our work in environmental education, our work in biodiversity, our work in sustainable agriculture, in developing not only scholars, but also programs, our work in community health, through this kind of close collaborative, I think, and responsible work with the industry itself. And this is oil and gas industry. We're now beginning to work with the gold industry, as I've indicated. So there's a lot to be done. A lot that we will chew upon these next few days. I am very delighted to, hopefully that tomorrow is a holiday so that I'll be able to check in and sit in on much of the conference, much of the seminar that's going on. But I'd like to once again say thank you all for joining us this morning, and we look forward to the outcomes of the seminar, because as we have noted, the work is really, really, really kind of looking to the future, which is what we all hope to be able to do. And I think in a contemplative way, a very structured and systematic way, which is what we would expect from one of our best university brains and on our new institutes in the university. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me these few remarks. And I thank you again for being here, and welcome to, if not only virtually, to the conference. Thank you.